we have assembled a wonderful selection of 7 experts to take the questions. And what I'd like to ask them to do just before we start taking the questions is for each of them just to tell you who they are, what their companies do, if you don't already know, just so we're all clear, and then we can start taking questions from the floor. So if you start to my left.
My name is Phil Hutton from Tyco Security Products. We're a manufacturer of IP and analog video equipment, end-to-end solutions. My role in the company is IP security specialist, and I look after consultancies and large end users that specify products.
My name is Julian Inman. I'm Technical Support Manager for Exact Technologies Europe Limited, which is a subsidiary of Exact Technologies Inc. We are a digital video recorder and network video recorder manufacturer, and also developer of video management software. My role within the company is covers the EMEA region for any pre-sale and post-sale technical support, and with covering all aspects of bid proposals, replies, technical support, post-sale queries, and the like.
My name's Mark Holden. I'm a sales manager within NICE. NICE manufacture video recording platforms, audio recording platforms, physical information management, physical security information management platforms, and intelligence applications and debriefing applications.
I'm Tony Lannan from Gearing Europe. I'm the IP Surveillance Business Development Manager for Europe. We manufacture everything from infrastructure to cameras to storage devices to Wi-Fi.
I'm Peter Curry from Milestone. I'm a Channel Business Manager for Milestone UK. Milestone specialises in VMS, video management systems.
I'm Andrew Denton, Sales Manager for Meartech Limited. Meartech design and manufacture analog, hybrid and IP video management systems.
Peter McKee, I'm the MD for Aricont Vision Europe, based in Frankfurt. Aricont Vision are probably the world's leading manufacturer of high-resolution megapixel cameras. One of the very few that are still 100% open platform. We don't have our own software, so we work across the board with all VMS.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So now you're all informed as to the full spread of the expertise on the panel in front of you. So I'll turn it open to the floor to ask any questions. But just before you do, when you're asking a question, just say your name and who you are, and please try not to ask questions about pricing or commercial issues, because they won't get an answer, basically. So. Okay, so maybe you can answer questions about commercial issues today.
Okay, if I may, start off.
Yeah.
Paul Hennings from the IP UserGroup, asking the whole of the panel, what do you think is the major issue that's preventing wholesale adoption of IP video particularly?
Education.
One-word answers aren't acceptable.
I think certainly from my perspective, is the number of people that I talk to all over Europe, and what we find is most people want to adopt IP, and they want to move forward and start implementing this thing. The problem is that they don't quite understand a lot of the technology that's behind. Again, we'll go back to the switches from earlier. How does the switch work? Why does it work? If you can understand the basic fundamentals and realise that it's not as difficult as you actually think, and that's I think that's something that we all need to push forward into the marketplace. So, from manufacturers, we need to educate the channel better than we currently are doing, and get the resellers to do the same.
I think there's other reasons as well. I think our industry is very slow to change. I think we're very backward at jumping on new technology in lots of ways. But I think there's not been no real drivers to drive us to IP until the advent of megapixel cameras becoming commonplace. I think that's now a real goal to achieve, and it's something that's seen as a real benefit to get better resolution, whereas IP for IP's sake in the past wasn't perhaps driver enough to take you over the change.
Absolutely. It's like video analytics, really. Too much was promised too soon by this part of the industry, and that's often an issue and a problem. We overpromise and we underdeliver. Nowadays, we're where we need to be, and as you say, what's driving the industry at the moment seems to be megapixels, and it seems to be more and more partners, installers, and end users to some extent skilling up. So I can't tell you why it's taken so long, but I believe that perhaps a little bit of overpromising and under-delivery in the early stages of the technology is part of the problem.
And I think it's a historical effect as well, because we've got an awful lot of analogue infrastructure in the UK market already, so it's going to be getting that converted, whereas lots of the markets that have taken on IP far more wholeheartedly, they didn't have that legacy to actually convert.
Absolutely.
What about NICE's point of view? How do you
I actually don't see that many barriers nowadays. I think that certainly in the markets that we operate in, the market is educated. They demand the benefits of IP wider than just megapixel technology. I think the wider benefits of IP, the access and the availability models that can be put in, it's widely accepted that the market's converting. I just don't see analogue there anymore. From our business.
Andrew, what about from the control rooms point of view? Because that's a major area for your company.
I think legacy is a big part of it at the moment, especially with the downturn in the economy. People haven't got the money to change out everything. So we are seeing a lot of uptake of IP, but it's happening quite slowly, and people are being very cautious about how they do it. And making sure it can deliver on their requirements before they jump in with both feet.
Peter, from your point of view, you've got a fairly cutting-edge camera technology out there. How do you see that uptake?
Well, I think as Julian said, it could be a regional question as well. I think in the UK you have a very traditional security market. So there's a lot of legacy stuff there, but that also is part of the conception that it's the whole market. It's not really, because there's a lot of IT companies that have embraced IP technology for years. Otherwise, people like myself wouldn't still be here after 12 years, because there has been a large amount of successes in the past 12 years, and there's certainly been a lot of movement forward. But as I say, regionally, if you look at Scandinavia, for example, practically everything that gets done there, even in the security, and that's if we're looking at two different markets. What we're talking about is trying to get the security market to go over to IP, which is generally a lot more difficult than bringing the IT people in and bringing them into the security market. If you look at Italy, for example, again, they were pretty leading edge when it comes to security systems using IP. You very rarely get anything else. The question now is not, in most places, is not whether going IP or analog. It's really about how to utilize the higher resolutions. That's the question.
And I think from my point of view, sitting on the standards committee and looking at a global perspective as well, looking at projects my company gets involved in Asia, in India and so on, where we're looking at new projects rolling out in transport, in CNI. Take India, for example. They are traditionally embedded with analog technology, and it is an education process, absolutely. And part of the problem is that they can get any old set of installers to run down the road, string a bit of conduit up the wall, screw the camera to the wall, and there it is, working. As soon as you start mentioning the word switch, network, and so on, there's a problem. There is a challenge. I won't say a problem, a challenge that has to be overcome. And we're still facing in many markets, and the Asian market is very typical of this, of L1 wins, the lowest bid, compliant bid wins. So there is a job to be done at the first hurdle in the design stage, when they're receiving, the operators and the users of the systems are receiving their advice. So for the consultants in the room, this is really playing into your hands, is making sure they get the correct advice of the best systems and services that they need to do their job. So often it's a case of, I need 500 cameras. Well, what's number 1 going to do? Well, I don't know. What's number 2 going to do? What's number 500 going to do? I just need 500 cameras. So there's a lack of, sometimes, of true design concepts out there to understand how these things can benefit. And yes, taking the point about legacy, public sector projects, very much so, cannot just throw away the legacy systems. You know, we've seen that. The Crossrail project had to integrate into the existing Transport for London system, as an example. Even though it's all IP, the rest of the system isn't necessarily so. Excellent. Any final points from the audience? Want to expand on that any further? Any comments that they'd like to add to that?
One thing interesting was that the price wasn't really mentioned there, was it? Only to a great degree. It's a big price issue.
Price is a challenge, and it depends how you view it, and there have been lots of discussion around these tables and these conferences about the benefit of IP and is it cost effective or isn't it cost effective. Certainly, again, from my point of view, where we've just accepted into the new standard the IP camera specifications, we are actively suggesting to our operators in the transport interfacing industry that where you have open space systems and designs, that using IP is actually cost beneficial, even though the cameras themselves are slightly more expensive. The fact that you need less install points because you're using less camera points with better resolution, better fields of view, is a benefit to the overall project. It isn't just simply a case of I can use a $200 analog camera versus a $300 or $400 IP camera. That really isn't the point anymore. The point is your system's design and understanding how the IP fits in that, the cost benefit, and making sure you are doing that cost benefit analysis. Not simply saying analog cameras are cheap, period. That's not the case. It is the case that they are cheaper, but you have to look at it from a systems design point of view to understand how that fits. Anybody else want to add to that?
Of course, that's part of the education process, because the end user, the customer, have to understand the value proposition before they can make a decision. If they don't have that information, they're not going to make the right decision.
Okay.
Is there any opinion regarding BT Red here within this discussion? With a look at the infrastructure, most of the town centres it's BT that use analogue circuits. But what they're asking for today to move to IP and the increase in cost to reuse that fibre for IP connectivity as opposed to analogue. Is there any government body looking at that? Because it's not really, it's the same thing, but yeah, BT want more money to transfer Ethernet signals up it rather opposed to analogue.
Any comments from the panel that we have come across this in projects?
I have a comment. There are different divisions of BT. Yeah, that division of it isn't always the best to go to for that big connection.
Well, what they have most of the town centres up down in the UK, though, that's the problem. And what they have is analog circuits out to most of the street level cameras. They have a firm glass one.
I know people that have cancelled the contracts with Redcare as it is now, and moved to another service within BT and take a new installation of an IP solution instead. And from another department, it's cost less money.
You've got to also remember the BT Redcare is part of BT Retail, and they're now managed. They're all buying through OpenReach. The OpenReach telecommunications, the RS1000D circuit, which is the digital carrier, is available to any OLA, which is any operator, can actually go and buy that service and resell it to you. So you don't need to buy it through BT Redcare, you can buy it through any other provider. But the difficulty was that actually they are very, very cheap circuits, so much so that NTL Business complained to Ofcom about opening them. So the actual fibre circuits, the fibre in the ground by BT Redcare is a lot cheaper than you could buy fibre in the ground from any other reseller. So they were declared as more or less anti-competitive. So I don't remember whether you remember about 5 or 6 years ago there was all rumours about price increases, and that was all because of the OpenReach separation from BT Redcare. So, but I understand that there will be offers coming out from BT Redcare that will maybe do a buyback scheme, so they can run additional services. So you still get your camera, still get your feed, you can get it on IP if you want to, on a VLAN, but also with additional services that can be run over that fibre, like town centre services. So as a more holistic approach, which obviously IP gives. You know, converting analog cameras to IP cameras, okay, you can get megapixel, but actually you can get additional services out there that could be run. And that's where the greater business benefits are, and you maybe cut down the amount of connections to the transportation nodes.
Yeah, that's the other issue really, is there's some kind of decentralisation. A lot of councils I've worked with over the years have a lot of infrastructure, an awful lot of buildings, and really they need a single fibre to that building to pick up a number of cameras. So really they should be looking to save money on their fibre conversion, not spend any more on it. It seems crazy to me that you'd have 200 circuits in a town centre and have a single fibre between, effectively a single fibre, because it isn't single fibre, but a single fibre between each camera and a rental cost for each of them. I think we need to get a bit smarter in the way they start to bring this information back. And if you can hop other data and other services onto it at the same time, all well and good. Different budgets. We're seeing more of that now, definitely. People are talking to us about it.
Any other comments from the panel? No? Good question. Who do you work for, by the way?
It's marketing contributions.
Okay. You weren't from like BT, Open Reach or anything?
I don't think
I didn't think so either. Okay. Any other questions sort of moving on from that theme in terms of looking at how systems are being deployed, how we're taking care of legacy, which is an obvious area. Does anybody else want to ask a question in any of those areas? You're all shy. They don't bite. I've been here for 20 minutes now. They haven't bitten me yet. What about the areas of control rooms and this ongoing change that we're seeing in VMS capability, moving towards PSIM capabilities, the introduction of information-based content as well as vision-based content within control rooms? Are any of you seeing confusion in the market in that space, or need clarification about what product, what solution perhaps best works? No. You're all very good. Always the second question.
Okay, second question from me. Excuse me. Phil, you spoke about integration this morning, and I'm sure that all of the panel have been involved in integrating to a certain degree. Do you see that as possibly the only future for the industry, bearing in mind that, with all due respect to the camera manufacturers, that cameras or boxes will become more commoditised, so adding value to the traditional business is going to be absolutely essential, and I ask that to everybody on the panel.
Well, I certainly can see it as a way of keeping the traditional installer in business. Because clearly, if they don't look at other ways of adding value to their offering, it's going to be no different to the offering from a local job man that can screw a camera to the wall and connect an idea for his client. So I think integration is certainly an important factor, and I think one of the main ways that the industry will develop. I think technology will develop as well, and we'll have other features to add very shortly. There's not been a wholesale uptake of analytics. Analytics is certainly used in the marketplace, but I don't think it's actually yet taking hold where the true conventional detection would be used. So that's another avenue where value being added.
I would agree with that. Certainly in terms of analytics, I think there's a lot more scope to actually get some benefit out of analytics. There aren't that many practical projects that have actually gained real traction. I guess probably the hard shoulder running is probably the most prevalent one that we can actually see on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure that as processing power develops at the edge, there's going to be a lot more capability there, and then a lot more benefit derived from that.
I don't think it's just a case of adding value either. I think in this day and age it's also about efficiency, and the efficiencies you can get by integrating multiple systems together to provide a single solution that provides all the information to the operator.
I think that for years we've talked about IP as a medium, and we need to think that the first big business benefit is that It's the convergence of voice, video and data onto a single network infrastructure that offers the big business benefits, certainly to the corporate clients. They've got one switching infrastructure that can offer business continuity, and that's the convergence benefit. So that's nothing to do with integration, but a lot of clients are still putting separate networks in. They're buying separate switches for their security and actually running parallel network infrastructures. So convergence is the first one, and that lowers cost and increases availability. That's really about a consolidation plan, so a consolidation of data, a consolidation of infrastructure. And the next stage is really this unification, which is where you talk about integration between the simple one we do in security is access and CCTV. It's often integrated. But we can start to integrate lots of different subsystems together, and that's when we start to get big user end benefits by bringing the different technologies together, and that's the more holistic approach that we need to take, and that really starts to meld not only the technologies together but also with the business processes and the people that are engaged with the roles as well. So more like enterprise resource planning for security, and that's where PSIM comes in. That's where PSIM binds together all of these three elements. And at the moment, we talk about integration, but what we've got to think about is the end goal. Why are they integrating? Everybody talks about this wonderful world integrate, and actually what we've got to do is say, well, what is the objective of integrating these two platforms, and what will it give the end user? And that's the conversation, rather than about we need to integrate. What's the business objective, which is much more verticalised as well.
I think you picked up a nice piece there, because I think as part of the integration process is more and more, as we're going to people who want to know what else can it do, what else can we do with this system. So that obviously brings in integration very nicely. I mean, our view of that, obviously, with our auto surveillance VLAN, as I was talking about this morning, is you can use this and it'll separate the security network away. If you look at the objections of old, which have always been the IT managers saying, you're not putting that on my network. Now we're actually going to them and saying, well, actually, you can put your network on ours, and it's still separate. So there's a bit more value add into what we're supplying. So rather than just supplying a switch and a camera, we're actually supplying something that they can utilise and cut down on their own costs.
I mean, we've seen a very slow but sea change, basically, in the way stuff integrates together. I've been in this industry for 25 odd years. One of the companies I worked for years ago was a company called Petards. Petards had a DOS-based early version of PSIM, effectively. All connections to it were serial. And if anyone ever said to Petards, well, we'd like to integrate to you, they'd have run a million miles. No, we do the integration. And one of the changes we're seeing in this common IP and IT platform is companies more willing to exchange SDKs and the ability to integrate products together easier, quicker, and more intuitively. And that's actually going to be an interesting thing in the next few years, because we're seeing it more and more now. Subsystems creating connections to each other and going for a more best-of-breed solution. So that's interesting to see.
Can I just ask a question regarding integration problems where from the alarms? Phil did show the full integration of CCTV to TIL system, but obviously I was using a Tyco end-to-end product solution. There seems to be a problem with integration between different manufacturers. Obviously the one bit is Andrew has come in and stated regarding the standards of ONVIF being software-based and compliant is in its basic infancy at the moment. Then this main thing was Peter's comment regarding obviously highly pleased with his product, his camera innovation, probably just as pleased as you are, Tony, the D-Link, but there's no standard for megapixel camera, where one manufacturer can say, I've got 5 megapixel camera, and another one can say the exact same thing. You put the two of them onto a monitor, and the quality of the image is vastly different. Should we not be as manufacturers ourselves, be more go along the lines of trying to standardise the product before talking about multi-integration?
It's a good question, and it's one that certainly from my own experience, when as chair of the Standards Committee in the US, we face on a regular basis. Why is camera A better than camera B, and so on, when they're supposed to be all working in the same way. And it's OnViv is a move towards interconnection between and interoperability between manufacturers. It's not a move to actually look at the quality of service that you get from a specific camera in a specific application. We've done that in transport and critical national infrastructure. That's part of the standards process that we've undertaken. But there are very few agencies around the world that have adopted that. But I'd like to throw it back to the panel to see how they address that, because the comments you made are very valid, and it's one that we frequently get asked about. Wide dynamic range performance, the dB ratings at the top end, at the bottom end, and all of these sorts of things as to why one camera works better in one application and another in a different application. So we've got a couple of camera manufacturers on the panel.
I'm not from a camera manufacturer, but I would say that it's part of the natural development of a manufacturer. That's what a manufacturer wants to do, is to produce a camera that's better than anybody else's. They'll use the best sensor. I don't know, many different sensors to use, different compression algorithms that can be used. So that's always something that we want to maintain, I think, is the ability for individual manufacturers to produce exceptional products and meet that differentiation.
I think also the complexity of measuring quality on cameras has become more difficult with the age of digital compression. And that's the big bug we've got, really, and there is no measure of digital quality. Whereas within analog cameras, it was very easy to measure the quality and quality degradation. But even then, the published figures from all of the manufacturers didn't reveal the whole truth. As we know, they talked about light gathering capability, sensitivity at different IRE levels with different lighting levels. It was all really had to get the camera out and test it in comparison. And I don't think that's ever going to change. The further difficulty that we've got is that MPEG-4 H.264 is a compression standard, but everybody has their own interpretations of the compression. So Aricont were talking about you've got your own codec effectively, which is part of the H.264. Now, the way that they quantize that, which is the way that they reduce the number of frequencies down from basically 250 megabit stream to a 3 megabit stream, is all different. Every manufacturer can interpret that differently within the standard. And also processors make a massive difference as well. Aricont, I'm sure, used very, very high quality processors, and you'll have cheaper manufacturers that will have lower quality processors, so therefore they can't do as many cycles of maths before they put the video on the wire. So their standardisation in that area, I don't think is going to occur. However, from something like OnViv and PSIA standards, they can at least get the call, well, it's not call setup, but the connection and the session level.
Because that's the way that we get the best out of our product. There's a lot more work involved, and it's not simple, but I don't really think that OnViv can provide that solution, certainly not overnight. It will be quite a long time before everybody can just plug in and get the most, because every camera does something slightly different, or most of them. So you can't utilize some of the features in the camera just using OnViv. You have to have a direct integration.
Following on from that, is a message coming from OnViv as a body and manufacturers with OnViv compliant equipment? Is that message coming out strong enough? Because it doesn't appear to be that it is, and certainly from an end user's perspective, OnViv appears to be the panacea, and in reality it doesn't actually be, which is causing difficulty in the marketplace.
I think from a VMS point of view, We would love an open standard that would work because we could get on with writing some sexy software, sexier software, developing plugins day after day after day, and all of the support that takes, etc. So from a VMS point of view, we love that. But yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, people say to me day in, day out, oh, are you ONVIF compliant? And I say yes, but, and it's always the but bit really, and that's to talk about the limitations of ONVIF. And all the time there is innovation in the market, and these guys are coming out with new features and functions. There'll never be a common standard that will fit all, unfortunately, seemingly, certainly at the moment with the technologies about, but no, I agree there. And going back to the megapixel argument, I think that's why we see a lot of people talking about HD now, because at least they can try and measure it a little bit more and understand 720p and 1080p. So, yeah, we'll see.
I think also with the ONVIF standard, it's a quick way to disappointment from an end user perspective as well, because ONVIF actually only gives you 9 functions for the camera, 9 bits to it. So if you're looking for some special feature that's in this particular camera that you're looking at, it might not be covered by the ONVIF standard. So it's always best to go with the full bugger integration with the camera that you want to integrate.
Given, I think we know that, but the difficulty is in the marketplace. That I don't think that message has been getting over.
Sure.
Can I just say, where ONVIF's concerned, you touched on analytics not quite being ready in the beginning. I think ONVIF suffered the same fate. It wasn't quite ready in the beginning, and so down the line, people took a negative effect. So ideally VMS, plug it in, you turn left on your PTZ, it goes right, it looks down, you're sort of hold position. These were only small problems, but I think the industry made it a bigger problem. But now, as we pointed out earlier, everyone's sharing their SDKs now. Everybody's giving CGIs away to give commands, to fix the problem, because we all want the same thing. We all want interoperability with everyone.
I think you're right in saying that, but there are manufacturers out there that will share their SDKs, but they only provide limited functions.
Yes.
So you have manufacturers that will share an SDK, but the SDK that they share with us doesn't give us the full camera function. So because they're also a camera manufacturer and a network video recorder manufacturer, and they want their system to work better, so they keep some functions back. See, unfortunately, it's a complicated world, but the benefits are there enough to justify the adoption. It's happening. It is a growing market. IP's not going to go away. We're still busy writing plugins, and I can see in 20 years' time we'll still be writing plugins. I don't really see much impact from ONVIF, other than people going, well, is it about ONVIF? That's it. I don't don't know of any implementation that's ever used ONVIF of our platforms.
It tends to be a get out of jail, doesn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a question that's asked, and we go, yes, it's fine. We're a member of the board, but the utilisation of it is so low. Plugins are the way, but there are, as I said, we've got plugins to manufacturers where we cannot get access to features that are in the cameras that the client has seen, so that then they end up disappointed, and that's what needs to change. And I think it's interesting that everybody's cottoned on to megapixel. As you said, megapixel is from one manufacturer to the next manufacturer is always different. The biggest thing is the compression that's applied. We really could do with having some form of research for a qualitative measure on digital equipment. At the moment, there isn't anything. We used to have something on the analog world, and it was easy to measure. And in actual fact, if they stated all of the figures that you needed to state, you could actually measure the difference between two manufacturers from a data sheet. If the data sheet wasn't revealed, all the information wasn't revealed, then it's useless. But there were some manufacturers that did reveal all of the data. And we could do with the similar sort of thing, some measures on image quality. The biggest problem, though, is the method of compression that we've got. Discrete cosine transform doesn't enable you to measure sort of like a complex image. If you put a complex image in front of it, it does a brilliant job. Digital does great. But then when you put a nice flat image in front of it, it looks all a bit motley. So it's a weird thing.
saying that the H.264 compression rate's just too wide a balance when you get guys like Peter that can keep their own codecs on it.
I think you have to bear in mind that H.264 and MPEG are algorithms that were never designed for CCTV. You have to understand where they come from. They come from a world that is intent on sending the smallest possible signal down a communications path to a set-top box, and for that set-top box to convert that at the most efficient way possible to present an image that your eye will then itself correct. You introduce CCTV, and all of a sudden, it's different. We benefit from that because it's a mass market. But the downside for that is we have to take foibles with it. It was never designed for us. Certainly in the transport C&I world, we have set parameters within H.264 that we have to have compliance on. So we set the number of iframes that we want to see. We set the latency in there. If you want to go down the road of using H.264, MPEG-4, we still allow MJPEG, we still allow MPEG-2, and you can argue about the fact, oh, they're inefficient, but they work. And for the applications that you're into and the requirements of the industries that you're working in, that's a balance that you have to strike in the system's design. Just because it's new, just because it's glitzy, and when H.265 comes along, those numbers will be even more staggering, doesn't mean to say it's the right solution for your job. Just because the analog camera is there, it doesn't mean you have to throw it away and change it for change sake. In public sector, you can't do that because you have the legacy and justification to do that. So a lot comes back to systems design. The standard we produce, and it's the only standard in the world right now that's out there for a requirement spec for CCTV in an application, sets all these parameters. We set the test, we set the acceptance, we set the quality per application. So if you've got a camera looking at a fare payment machine, it has to have certain frame rates. If you have a camera sticking out the front windshield of a bus, it has to have certain frame rates. And we set the latency rate. So it comes down to systems design. And unfortunately, there are too many industries to try to cram it into one area. Safe Cities is driving us into looking at some of these areas drastically because it's a very similar requirement from that of the transport industry, so we get heavily involved in that. But you're right, there is a difference between ONVIV, which is basically an interconnect, an ICD between manufacturers, versus you're not going to get quality. If you go to Shenzhen and have this discussion, they won't have a clue what you're talking about, because all they'll say to you is this camera is $10 and this camera is $9.99. Buy this one. We try to use, in the analog standards, we use Rotokin as an acceptance method, as a testing method, and for all its foibles, it's there. It's quantitative. I can put a number on it. I can tell you which graphical you have to agree to, and we'll go to the design. There is a digital version of Rotokin. It isn't that good, but we put it in the standard. There is is it Henry is the other one? I always get the names wrong. Rod. They're all calling them different names, but there are other ways and means of doing that. So you have to apply that. So unfortunately, it's been driven by industry groups within sectors to understand, do I want a military level of detection on my perimeter, or am I prepared to accept a residential level of detection on my perimeter, and how much is that going to cost me? I'm conscious that we've overrun the time. I'm grateful. Is there any final comments on that? Because obviously it's an area we can go on talking about for hours.
I've got one on integration if you don't mind. Just to give you an idea on integration, we have a team of 26 people that all they do is integrations to third-party pieces of equipment, and it's a full-time job to manage those integration processes. Every time we get a new iteration of software for one product, it runs the risk of breaking the integration into a third-party piece of equipment. So we actually invest in every piece of equipment that we integrate to. We actually buy it, and we've spent something like £4 million so far in the last 3 years on buying pieces of equipment that we integrate to. And it poses a real nightmare going forward for a security manager of a building when he's buying several disparate systems that he's trying to integrate. If he wants a new feature on his access control, for instance, and he upgrades the access control, he runs the risk then of breaking the integration to every other system that's hanging on to it. And somebody needs to take that on board and test it. Now, we do that every time we bring out a new version of software. We test the integrations that we've already got. But it's a very complex process, and it's a big headache for a security manager if he's buying systems from different manufacturers.
Okay, well, as I say, we could go on for hours with this. I'd like to thank each and every one of the gentlemen on the committee for their time and for taking some unrehearsed, unexpected questions. And trust me, Paul and I barely talked about the questions last night over the beers, which is when the fact packet came out and they were written on. Just for information, my presentation, which is following Peter's right now, will go into the processes that we've looked at in the standard. So it's an update on the standard we produced, the standard that was approved just last week in the US for the IP camera addendum, which I'm sure you'll find of interest, and they'll answer an awful lot of what has been thrown out here. And you'll be surprised to understand that the Home Office also participates in our committee and agrees parameters on our standard, but they are a bit slow in coming forward with standards here in the UK. Once again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll hand back to Paul.
Okay, thanks very much.